The people who seem the easiest to control are often performing. But the ones who stay silent, observant, unmoved, they're the ones no strategy can crack. And most people never realize why. There's a common assumption about power in social interactions. We think the loudest voice wins. We think confidence means domination, and silence means weakness. But human behavior doesn't work that way. The reality is far more unsettling. Every day, people use emotional pressure to bend conversations in their direction. They raise their voice to create urgency. They rush you into decisions before you've had time to think. They make you feel guilty for saying no. These tactics work on most people because most people operate on autopilot, reacting instead of responding. But there's a specific type of person these strategies fail against. Not because they're smarter. Not because they're more educated. But because of how their nervous system processes social pressure. And once you understand the psychology behind it, you start to see why emotional control is the most underestimated form of power. When someone tries to influence you, they rely on one thing: your need for their approval, agreement, or emotional validation. This is the foundation of nearly every persuasion technique. If you care what they think, they have leverage. Calm people don't detach because they don't care about others. They detach because they've trained themselves not to need external validation in the moment. When someone raises their voice, a calm person doesn't interpret it as danger. When someone withdraws affection, they don't panic. Their sense of stability comes from within, not from the other person's reaction. This makes them nearly impossible to pressure. Because the tools that work on most people, guilt, urgency, fear of rejection, require an emotional dependency that simply isn't there. Most manipulation works because it forces an immediate response. A pushy salesperson asks you to decide now. A guilt-tripping friend demands an answer before you leave the room. The strategy depends on catching you off guard, before your logical brain has time to evaluate what's happening. Calm people operate with a built-in pause. They don't feel compelled to fill silence. They don't rush to answer questions that make them uncomfortable. This delay isn't accidental. It's a practiced behavior that creates space between stimulus and response. And in that space, manipulation loses its power. When you don't react immediately, the other person's script falls apart. They've prepared for resistance, for emotion, for argument. But they haven't prepared for someone who simply waits. Who listens.
Ou considère.
And then responds on their own terms. Here's what most people miss. Manipulation isn't random. It follows patterns. The same emotional triggers, the same linguistic structures, the same behavioral sequences. Calm people notice these patterns because they're not distracted by the emotional content of the interaction. While others are focused on how they feel in the moment, calm individuals are observing the structure of the conversation. They notice when someone answers a question with a question. When flattery arrives just before a request. When someone creates a problem they're conveniently positioned to solve. This awareness doesn't come from suspicion. It comes from observation without emotional attachment. They're watching the chess game while others are reacting to each move. And once you see the pattern, you stop playing the game entirely. Social pressure works because humans are wired for belonging.
Oui, fear exclusion.
We avoid conflict. We agree to things we don't want because saying no feels like rejection. This biological wiring made sense for survival in small tribes. In modern social dynamics, it makes us vulnerable. Calm people have made peace with something uncomfortable. Not everyone will like them, and that's acceptable. This isn't arrogance. It's a realistic understanding of human nature. When you stop needing universal approval, you stop being controlled by the threat of its removal. Someone who can walk away from a conversation, a relationship, or an opportunity without panic cannot be leveraged through social fear. And that terrifies people who rely on those tactics. A colleague approaches you near the end of the day, visibly stressed. They explain that a project is due tomorrow, they're overwhelmed, and they really need your help tonight. Most people feel the pressure immediately, the urgency, the guilt, the social obligation. A calm person responds differently. They pause. They ask clarifying questions. When did you receive this assignment? What have you completed so far? What specifically do you need from me? The questions aren't aggressive. They're information gathering. And often, the story changes. The deadline isn't actually tomorrow. Other people already said no. The crisis isn't a crisis. It's poor planning presented as an emergency.
The calme person might still help.
But they've made the decision from clarity, not pressure. During a disagreement, one person shifts the conversation away from the issue and toward how you're making them feel.
You're being cold. You're not listening.
You obviously don't care about me. This tactic works because it puts you on the defensive, trying to prove you're not the bad person they're suggesting you are. A calm individual doesn't take the bait. They acknowledge the feeling without accepting the accusation. I understand you're upset. Let's continue discussing the actual issue. They don't argue about whether they're cold or caring. They simply return to the original point. And when you don't engage with emotional redirection, it stops working. Someone presents their opinion as shared reality. We both know this is the right decision. Everyone agrees this needs to happen. The phrasing assumes you're already on board, making disagreement feel like you're breaking from consensus. Calm people catch this immediately, and they respond with simple clarity. I don't agree with that. No explanation.
No justification. Just the truth.
Because they understand something crucial, you don't owe anyone a detailed defense of your own perspective. Recognizing these patterns starts with one shift. Notice when you feel rushed, guilty, or pressured to respond immediately. Those feelings aren't random. They're often deliberately created.
Practice the pause.
When someone asks for an answer, give yourself permission to say, "Let me think about that," or "I'll get back to you." This simple boundary disrupts most pressure-based tactics. Pay attention to pattern over content. If someone consistently makes you feel a certain way before asking for something, that's information. If conversations follow the same structure, flattery, then request, then guilt if you decline, you're seeing a behavioral pattern, not a coincidence. Build comfort with silence. Most people fill quiet space because it feels awkward. Learn to sit in it. Let others manage their own discomfort. You'll be surprised how much information people reveal when they're the ones rushing to fill the void. And most importantly, separate your worth from other people's reactions. Your value doesn't decrease because someone is disappointed you said no. Their disappointment is their experience to manage, not your emergency to fix. Calmness isn't passivity. It's not about being emotionless or disconnected. It's about maintaining your center when everything around you is designed to pull you off balance. It's about seeing clearly when others are relying on you staying confused. The people who stay calm in chaos aren't immune to manipulation because they're special. They're immune because they've learned to observe their own reactions before acting on them. They've built enough internal stability that external pressure doesn't determine their decisions. Once you understand this, the entire landscape of social influence changes. You stop reacting to what people say and start noticing what they're trying to accomplish. And in that awareness, you reclaim something most people give away without realizing: the power to choose your own response. Because the moment you stop reacting on someone else's timeline, you stop being a piece in their game.